Hello everyone and Happy New Year. Sometimes we know that hype doesn't live up to reality. Let's take some time to look back at some very disappointing vehicles from 2021. So first up we have the IXWA Strike patch, which introduced the South African Mini line. Now Britain, already being a nation with a lot of slow vehicles, certainly didn't need more slow vehicles. So the Ratal 20, the Ratal 90, and the ZT3A2, they were wheeled, slow, very large vehicles that didn't quite fit the meta. I gave them a try. I really wanted them to be good, but I just couldn't get into the Ratals and the ZT3A2. Also disappointing were all of the Oliphant tanks. They were pretty underwhelming. I knew they were just South African Centurions, but I wish they had been a little bit more fun to play. And to cap it off with the TTD, which was the end-of-line South African MBT, it seemed not many players were willing to grind for this, and it's really been mostly forgotten by the player base. So overall, pretty disappointing. But I think the biggest punch in the gut disappointment of this patch had to be the Mirage 3E. Now, I've already talked about this plane extensively on the channel. When it was introduced, it was at 11.0, and it continued to underperform. Currently, it sits at 10.3 alongside the Mirage 3C. Lots of people were hyped for this plane, including myself, and sadly, it was just a massive disappointment in War Thunder. I know the plane was really good in real life, but in War Thunder, it just did not work. At the time of this recording, France doesn't even have a fighter over 10.3 BR. Now on to Red Skies. Overall, this was a pretty good patch except for one thing, the MiG-23M. I was quite excited for this plane initially, but we quickly realized this plane was a big letdown for Russian mains. The disappointment was palpable. It needed buffs almost immediately because it massively underperformed. At the time, it was one of the worst top-tier jets ever introduced. Even with buffs, it still suffers from a low number of countermeasures, bad radar, and bad maneuverability. R60Ms made it a tiny bit better though. Now we're on to Direct Hit. The same patch that bought us the Viggen also gave us some duds like the F104G for Italy. I think it was an afterthought. I mean, it has an RWR, it has countermeasures, but it has less missile choices and it carries overall less missiles than the F104S. I mean, there really wasn't much to speak about here. Almost no one is flying this, and this jet was really a side grade and a big letdown for Italian mains. If you played top tier Italy aviation, what you were really waiting for was at a minimum the F104 ASA. So up next is the F8E Crusader for France. No patch can be complete without another mediocre aviation entry for France. While this jet is interesting, if you really want to play the F8 Crusader, just pick the version in the US tech tree. The F8E Crusader has some interesting missile mix options. You can carry 2 R550s or 2 R530 infrareds or a semi-active radar homing missile, or you can carry one of each. You can also carry 4 AIM-9Bs, but why would you want to do that? I hardly see anybody flying this jet. So on to Groundbreaking, the Dozer Blade patch. I didn't really find any vehicles that were bad enough to make it to the list, but we did get some pretty worthless dozer blade mechanics for Earthworks. I don't really see anyone using this at all. So this brings us to the most recent patch, Wing Lions, also the patch that gave us the newest nation in the game, which is Israel. So up first is the F4J Phantom, and I gotta say it's a bit of a disappointment because if you play the US at all, this is not the jet we wanted. I didn't want to play another F4, so I'm a bit biased against the jet. And honestly, I haven't even felt the motivation to even start grinding this thing out. There were lots of other candidate aircraft with a pulse Doppler radar for the US, but as it stands, we got the F4J, and it's more of a side grade than an upgrade. It's definitely not a meta redefining jet at all. There are plenty of other channels that have actually done a full review on the F4J, and it's pretty meh. That's what I'm gathering from all the other reviews so far. Next up we have the premium MiG-21S, which is let down by mediocre 10G overload missiles. Historical or not, I wouldn't want to play this thing at 9.7. We're almost always going to be up tiered against planes with better missiles. And I think we needed another MiG-21 like we needed another F-4. Next up, and what a disappointment, is the Mirage 5F. What can I say? It's par for the course with mediocre entries for French aviation. It wasn't the Mirage F1 we were all expecting, and I hardly see anyone grinding out the 5F at all. I mean, I'll do it just because I love French planes, but gosh, we were really looking for the Mirage F1 here. And last but not least is the Kafir C7 for Israel. I mean, this plane is a classic case of a jet having great raw performance but failing as an integrated weapons platform. What's going on with this plane anyway? It had the wrong radar at first, and then the last time I looked, the radar was gone completely. And it's also let down by inferior infrared missiles, and it has no semi-active radar homing missiles at all. I was really expecting this jet to be good, and I think a lot of other people were as well. It seemed to kind of have flopped. Really big disappointment. Alright, so wrapping up here, if you enjoyed the video, go and hit that like button for me. And these are my opinions. Notably missing from the list are low and mid-tier aviation and ground vehicles, and anything naval. So if you have any candidates you think should have made it onto this list, please let me know in the comments. I'd be very interested in other perspectives on this. Thanks again, and I'll see you in a future video.